So we changed our thing from there's no finish line to we're at our best and we're helping others become their best. So we're doing this so we can help somebody, but it's helping us too. That's what Beyond the Team is.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazza, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with the SEAL. Today's guest, a retired SEAL from class 98 and was part of Underwater Demolition Team 11, where he completed multiple deployments. He moved to the reserves and was recalled during Desert Storm in 91 and was on SEAL Team 5 and SDV, which stands for SEAL Delivery Vehicle, Team 1. Today, he co-founded the nonprofit Beyond the Teams. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to introduce you to Mike Charbonnet. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great. It's an honor.
The honor is all mine. I'm so excited to talk to you because, well, your son's on next week's episode, which I'm really, really excited about. And you're my first father-son SEAL team, like SEALs. You know, I've never had that before. I'm sure it's small. You know, there's probably not a lot of father sons that were SEALs and stuff. I don't know. Is that common for you guys, or?
I don't know if common is the right word, but it's not really rare. There's a number of guys that they call legacies.
I'm just curious. This is just a question that really comes to my mind as you say that. Does being a legacy make it harder on your son going through buds, or is it a bit easier?
I think that it's probably easier because they see a lot more than somebody showing up and not really ever having been to the team area. Our sons grew up, you know, visiting me at work and going to a thing called SEAL Pups, which was like a little camp that they did here on the West Coast. But then, you know, the first phase instructors like to give them a little heat because of that too. But, you know, it's all in good fun. You know, they're not trying to get rid of them. They're just trying to make sure that they're the right people.
Did your son talk to you, like, in terms of when he was going through it, to see if you knew any of the instructors that were in his training?
He didn't really have to. He knew I'd been out so long that, you know, that I didn't know them. But he told me, you know, I knew he was up to it early on. His first week of his senior year of high school, he came into my office and said, "Dad, I'm not going to college. Don't try to talk me out of it." I said, "Okay, what are you going to do?" He says, "I'm going to join the Navy." So I got on the phone with a bunch of my classmates who were his uncles and said, "Hey, David's not going to listen to me. You need to talk to him, get him to go to college." So we basically manipulated him into doing a couple of semesters at junior college before he finally just said, "Forget this. I hate school," and joined the Navy. He knew what he wanted to do. He knew it was going to be a big challenge. But that's basically what it comes down to. Like anything else, if you really, really want something, the price matters less and less. He wanted it.
Okay, this kind of reminds me of, I used to work on Dancing with the Stars, and I remember I worked with the Olympic gymnast, I think he's Shawn Johnson or something. I forget exactly what her name was, but she was a gymnast. And she said, when I have children, they will never be gymnasts. I'm not even putting them in gymnastics. It's not happening. Did you feel that way? Is that why you were trying to talk David out of like being a SEAL or going that route? Or
I wasn't really trying to talk him out of being a SEAL. I just wanted him to experience college. That's all.
Okay.
And he legitimately hated school. You know, he's one of those guys that he would have done fine if he had stayed, you know, done a career in the Navy, then gone to college. He would have done fine. It would, you know, I got thrown out of college. That's why I joined the Navy. And, when I went back to college, I was just flabbergasted at how easy it was because I'd never done anything hard before college, before the first time in college. I never really applied myself. You know, I did sports and stuff, and I like that. But in terms of, you know, discipline, like sit down with a book and study, that was foreign to me. But after being in the Navy, having to apply myself to something that wasn't necessarily the funnest thing I'd ever done was a piece of cake. I know if David ever, he's not going, but if he ever did go to college, he would just kill it. But
I definitely want to circle back in terms of the father-son, like Navy SEAL path. I have a bunch of questions about that, but I want to go into what you mentioned. You ended up going to the Navy because you ended up failing out of college or dropped out of college. You left college.
I was invited to leave and never come back.
Yeah, didn't work out. Being also class 98, it's not like there was a lot to talk about when it came to Navy SEALs, right? It's not what it is today and what we know, right? So, how did you know about it? And from what I was reading, and I don't know how accurate, but you requested like 7 times or something before you got your orders to go to Buds. So how did you know about Navy SEALs? When did you want to become a Navy SEAL, and what was the process to get yourself to go there?
I was a swimmer the last couple of years of high school and got a ride to college as a swimmer, got thrown out. So I was a fit guy in boot camp. In the third week of boot camp, I think, they marched us all to the base theater and showed us a movie about naval special warfare. And I'd already signed up for a job in the Navy when I joined. At this presentation, at this movie, they said, anybody interested in doing this, it's about UDT and SEAL teams, stay behind and we'll give you this test. So I stayed behind, and you had to swim a little bit. You had to run a little bit, do some pull-ups and push-ups and stuff. Just a few weeks before, I was training for nationals at a college swim team. I was really in shape. I just murdered that little test. And they were all excited about, maybe me going to training, but they looked at my little folder. They said, "Oh, you already have a school." And I said, I don't want to go to that school. I want to go to your school." They said, "Sorry, it doesn't work that way." So I went to a year-long school to learn how to work on these weapon systems on ships. And then I was assigned to a ship for a year. It took me 7 different times of taking that screening test to finally get orders to go to training.
You had it in you. Once you saw that, you were like, I want to go, I want to do this. Did you know what it was going to be when you went to Buds for the first time?
Well, in the movie, I think it was called Someone Special, which we nicknamed it Someone Stupid. It showed guys shivering in the mud and diving and parachuting. And it just looked like, it looked like it would be a lot of fun. And to be honest with you, I was incredibly immature when I joined the Navy. My single skill was goofing off. So I find myself on a ship cruising around. I mean, it's not really the life, and I kept thinking about that movie. I kept thinking, those guys, they blow stuff up, they dive, they parachute, they shoot stuff. I was good at breaking things. So I just thought it would be a better job. I didn't really know what it was going to entail. I just knew it was supposed to be hard. And, it should be.
So how was it for you through phase 1? And also it's so different in 98 versus now. And we had Hector Delgado on the show where he was mentioning, well, in his episode, he talked about the advancements that they made, in terms of, just different medical things, where he was like, well, when I was there, we didn't have these special shoes and this and that, all this different stuff that they have now. It was you take a Motrin and you move on, So how was it for you going through first phase?
Well, like everybody else, Hector is correct. Training is a ton better now than it was. They had a curriculum back when we went through training, but it was a free for all. If you made an instructor mad, he could just take you out on the beach and, beat the class until he got tired, until he got hungry and wanted to go home. That's just not allowed. Looking at David's, I got a schedule for his Hell Week. On the back, it says if the water's this cold, this is how long they can be in the water. And if the temperature's this high, this is how long you can run them. Some people say, oh, training got easy. No, training got better. Why would you want to run a guy into heat exhaustion when he might be a really good operator. Don't make it easy, and it's not easy. Everybody's class was the last hard class. For this show, 98 was the last hard class. But the tactics are better, the equipment is better, the guys are better, they're smarter, they're just switched on to a different level. And like I said, I was immature. I didn't know until well into my first deployment that, this is about fighting bad guys and like winning wars and stuff. I just thought it was about being in shape and having fun. And it was. It was always about being in shape, and it was always fun. But it didn't even dawn on me. It's like, hey, this is serious stuff. I'm in the military now. One of the things that I think we took advantage of is that the Navy didn't really want us. We were like the orphan stepchild of the Navy. They didn't want to know about us. Just don't get in trouble and don't cause problems, and you can do what you want to do. When warfare evolved into a situation where, giant columns of tanks and mechanized armor and stuff didn't really cut it, when you needed to send small groups of people into small areas with special tactics, SEAL team became the darling of the Navy. Mm-hmm. And along with that became this incredible level of oversight and meddling. Mm-hmm. So we had it good in a lot of ways. But the training now is, I think, terrific.
What, or do you remember a real challenging or a story that really sticks out to you in training? And also, did you have anything that, like, the injury, like that you got an injury story for us?
Well, when you talk to David, you'll hear about a real injury.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The challenge for me, so when I was in boot camp,
Mm-hmm.
we were swimming, 18, 20,000 yards a day. I was in shape. I wasn't a runner. So I go to Great Lakes, Illinois, where it's either close to 100 degrees or below freezing most of the year. Never ran. Then I go to a ship and never ran. And I got to Bud's training and I was just a fat guy. I wasn't in shape at all. Every time I took the screening test, I was a little less confident that I was ever going to get there. And all of a sudden I get orders and they fly me out of the Philippines back to San Diego to go to training. I was just a plump boy. As a matter of fact, I just saw the instructor a week or two ago who gave me the name Fat Boy in our class. So running was horrible for me. And fortunately, we went to the mud flats, which is the Tijuana River. You're on the East Coast, so you probably don't hear about this, but they closed the ocean almost weekly here because of the pollution coming out of the Tijuana River. It's basically a sewer. We're doing headstands in it. We're doing somersault races across the river and doing headstands in it. And so I got dysentery and lost 30 pounds in 10 days.
Wow.
So all of a sudden running wasn't such a big problem. But for first phase running, man, they would send us out to the beach, say, go, tell the class leader, go out and stretch out on the beach for a class run. And I would just get an ulcer, thinking, because when you fall out of a run, they have a thing called a goon squad. And so I was in every goon squad up until dysentery. And then I wasn't in it anymore. Dysentery is not always a bad thing. I should have written a book about the mud flats diet because, that became the craze after we were in training.
That's really funny and interesting at the same time. Were there any moments throughout it? Because again, for you, it was like you didn't know what you were getting into. Were there any moments where quitting crossed your mind?
Yeah, actually at the mud flats. I remember thinking, what am I doing? I don't know about now, but Hell Week used to be, it's always kind of a mind game, but you used to be able to go back and forth with the instructors. So they lined us all up and they were about to put us back in the mud, which is this filthy river. They said, who doesn't want to get in the mud? And I thought, you know what? They're going to let somebody not go in the mud. So I stepped forward. I was like, I don't want to get in the mud. He goes, okay, Charbonnet, get in the mud. Everybody else get back in your tents. And I was like, my dad was a stubborn guy who drank way too much. he would be sitting in the living room, and one of us would walk through. There were 6 kids in our family, and he'd start muttering under his breath, what we did wrong lately. And so I'm sitting in the mud, haven't slept for 3 days or 4 days, and I'm thinking, man, what am I doing here? And I'm hallucinating. It's like my dad is in the mud, and he's like muttering at the instructors, thinking, well, that guy's blood is in my veins. I mean, if he can sit here and just cuss at these guys, I can sit here too. But that was my weakest point.
Aside from the running, which after, you lost the weight, it was like easy breezy. Was there other moments that were a bit of a challenge for you at all?
It was funny to watch David go through training because he wasn't really afraid of the instructors, and probably because of being in the area as a kid. Enough guys quit in our class that I became the leading petty officer. So the senior enlisted guy. And that's who the instructors want to talk to in the morning. They tell you what's going to happen that day. But I had this deathly fear of the instructors. And if I saw an instructor come around the corner, I felt like I was going to have diarrhea. Just sick to my stomach almost, because that guy can wreck your day. So I had to go and talk to the instructors every day, after a while, like after the third week of training, and I just hated it. But, after a while, that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, and so after a while, that feeling went away after you kept doing it and doing it, or was it stayed with you till the end?
No, you get to toward the end of each phase, and it's kind of like, okay, we got this, But really, all you have to do is say or do the wrong thing, and then it's like, okay, get out on the grinder. We're gonna do this until I get tired of you doing it. They own you.
Yeah.
So.
And how many? If you remember, how many did you start with versus how many did you end with?
Well, we had a bunch of rollbacks at the end, but there were 24 original 98 guys. So I think we started with 131.
Wow. As a father, with a son that was what was going through it, were you, because you said you got the memos, and by the way, I forgot to ask you, what class were you winter, were you summer? What was David as well?
David, normally they're talking about what was your hell week. Our hell week was in the first week of April. It was chilly. David's hell week was in, I can't remember, but it was hot. It was dangerously hot. They had guys falling out because of heat problems in that class. They had to keep throwing them in the water to keep them cool enough, which normally going in the water is like what you dread, because in the summertime, the water in San Diego's, might warm up to 70 degrees, but that's still almost 30 degrees below 98.6. So if you stay in there for a little while, you're going to get cold. David had a very, very hot hell week.
Wow.
Yeah, dangerously hot. So they had to adapt, which is good. Back in the day, it would have been, hey, it says we're going on a 6-mile run. We're going on a 6-mile run. Not really taking advantage of what I
find it interesting that you said when you were reading David's paper and it was like, they can't be in the water for this long. Were you reading it and be like, we were in the water for 5 hours? Was there?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But I'm also super happy that, the community has evolved into not just a place for tough guys, but a place for smart, tough guys. Mm-hmm. There's still guys who make you scratch your head. It's like, how did this guy make it through training? But not most of them. Most of them are really sharp, and you asked what I felt about David going in, I just felt proud. And, I told him, it's funny because, you asked about the legacy thing. They taunt him. It's like they found a letter that I wrote to him. It's like, oh, does your daddy love you? And David said, oh, I'm sorry. Does your dad not love you? They say things like, you can't quit because your dad would be embarrassed. My dad doesn't care if I quit. He just wants me to be happy. David, in a way, was made for that job. He is the sneakiest, craftiest, kind of guy. I did a lot of training cell stuff. Now they've evolved, and even training cell is much better than it used to be. But I was in training cell at UDT 11, and then at Team 5, and then SDV Team 1. So we would do the pre-deployment training for the platoons that, as they were getting ready to go downrange. So I saw a lot of new guys, and a lot of really great ones and a lot of okay ones. And I really can only remember one guy who had more natural ability than David. He was a superstar. And David could have been that too, but he got hurt.
So when you mentioned like Seal Pup, like how he like went, was that your doing? Were you like, I'm gonna put my son in that, or was he like, Dad, I want to do Seal Pup?
Actually, it's funny. People say, "Oh, you raised these guys, team guys," and my wife did. I was gone a lot. She signed them up for that, and she actually went because they needed some volunteers. So she was one of the volunteers. I was sleeping on the beach with them and stuff. So she found out about it and took care of all that. I'd love to be able to take some credit, but it's not there for me.
So what lessons did you feel like you instilled in David that gave him the success that he has even now? Like, it's just the mindset of someone like David, knowing what he wants, going after it, having an accident and coming out the other side thriving, as a victor, not victim. What were some of the lessons that you instilled or that you think he took from you that helped shape him into the man that he is?
Oh, it's funny because our kids were just like regular kids, get to high school and, what do you know? You're an old person. So I remember a lot of talks with our sons that I was thinking, why am I saying this? Because it's not going anywhere. But now that they're both men, they've both said things that was like, shook me. It was, Dad, remember when you said this? I was like, the only thing I remembered is you weren't listening. So a note to all you younger people out there, parents, tell them the truth. It's going in. When Little League time came, we would let them join whatever sport or whatever team they wanted to. But we'd let them know that, if you sign up for this, you can't quit. I've had some jobs in corporate America, no big giant mega corporations, but smaller corporations. And it shocked me to see the mindset of giving up that it pervades so many places. I've been in board meetings where the topic of the day is why we can't do something. Instead of, here's an idea. Okay, yeah, we can do it. We'll need this, and just figure it out and then do it, which was maybe one of the biggest blessings of having a career in the teams, was working with people who learned how to say, okay, let's figure this out and do it. Our sons became stubborn in a good way. It's like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it, and we got to finish it. That may be a decent lesson that he learned from his parents.
It's funny because that's the lesson I talk about when people ask me about the way I was raised and one of the lessons. And that was one of the rules of my family, was like, you can do anything you want. You want to be in piano, you want to do this, you want to do that. The thing is, you can't quit until the end of the season. Like, when it's all over, you could decide if you want to go back or if it's not for you, but you can't just mid-quit, especially because it's hard or you're frustrated or you're not good. So yeah, and that definitely instills, especially in jobs, when you become in the career world, you're going to have jobs that you don't like or that you're not very good at right away, and you stick with it.
Right.
So yeah, I absolutely love that one. Now going back to you and going through buds and getting to the teams and going through your multiple deployments and stuff, how was it for you? Like, then you said you were immature and you didn't realize, like, when did it hit you that, like, this is war? I'm here for fun and games. Was there something that happened that kind of like woke you up?
Not one thing. I mean, it's just, being around guys older than me. I served during a period where there was no war. We did some things, that never really happened, I guess, but we were out there doing them. But it wasn't a war. It was a little mission here, mission there. Being around guys who were on the ground in Vietnam, that was the guys that put me through training. And they were the guys who were the leaders in my first couple of platoons. The early days were pretty freewheeling. It was kind of like there was not a hangover, but a high from making it out of Vietnam. So some of these guys were a little bit crazy and
Hmm.
it made it really fun. But then when we'd go and actually do some real work, they were dead serious. And so it was like, oh, these guys can turn it on and off, which I think became a lot harder in the environment that these younger guys are facing, where, multiple missions a night and, some of the stuff that was going on for the last 15 or 20 years has really been a burden for a lot of people. The younger guys have had a real tough time. Some of them really are okay, but some of them are having long lasting effects from all that.
Now, when you went to the reserve, you went back because of Desert Storm in 91. Is that correct?
Yes, I got recalled. That was the war that was over in like 15 minutes. One Jeep would drive up with 3 Americans in it with guns, and 500 Iraqi soldiers would throw their rifles over the hill and put their hands up. It was kind of, they were taking people out of their offices and in their suits, their civilian clothes, and putting them out in the desert with a gun. About 6 weeks into what was supposed to be a 1 year recall, the word came down: get rid of these reservists. They're costing us a fortune. But I wanted to stay in and do my year for a lot of reasons. And so they said, no, but you can re-enlist. So I did and wound up staying in until basically they found a brain tumor, which all my friends go, oh, of course. But that's what got me basically medically retired. The brain tumor did.
So let's talk about that. You find out you have a brain tumor, which is scary within itself, right? Then B, also the career that you had your whole life with, right? That you loved so much is over, right? How were you feeling? Were there any fears that were going on during this time? And how was that transition period to dealing with your health and also transitioning into civilian life?
The best that I remember, I mean, there's certainly was some level of the unknown that kind of bothered me, but it also kind of excites me. It's like, okay, what's next? But I was having fun and I didn't want to stop having fun. And that kind of happened. We wound up in Houston. So my best friend in the Navy, my swim buddy, dive buddy in training, was a corpsman, a Navy corpsman, was like a medic. He got to go to PA school in the Navy. The Navy chose him for this program. So I saw the schooling he had, and then I saw the job he had as a PA, and I thought, medical people have helped me a lot. I like helping people. I want to be a PA. So I applied to a bunch of schools, and the school in Houston called me up and said, you're going to get in. You're our second alternate, and every year we go through 8 or 10 alternates. So get here. I moved my family from Hawaii, where SDV team was, to Houston in July, which is like part way to hell. And I didn't get in. They said, oh, what are you doing here? I said, well, you told me to come. They said, oh man, nobody called you? We only went through one alternate this year. I was in Texas with no prospects. My wife had already signed up to be a school teacher at this little Christian school, and my boys were already signed up to go the next, year. We were renting a house, and it's like, okay, well, what do we do now? Well, the first thing I did was I called this surgeon in Hawaii, and I said, hey, you said this tumor will wait 2.5 years because that's how long the school is supposed to be. He said, yeah. I said, well, it wait 3.5 years. I was thinking I'll apply next year and get in. He wanted to know why I was asking. So he said, well, just come back. We'll cut it out now. So I did. I flew back to Hawaii. They cut the tumor out. I could still, walk and chew gum. So they sent me back to Houston. And eventually the paperwork caught up with us and I was out of the Navy. My brother had a small company doing consulting for oil and gas stuff. So I started working with him, not really thinking it was going to be a long-term thing. It was, I'll find a real job. But we worked together for the next 15 years and built a pretty big company out of it. He knew everything there was to know about oil and gas exploration, and I knew how to run people. I was like the fifth guy he had ever hired to put on a crew where we had up to 300 people working for us at times. We developed something decent. And then 15 years later, we get a call that David's being life flighted from the drop zone. So we were on the next planes out of there.
And then you went back to San Diego.
Yes. Yeah.
So you said something interesting, and I want to ask, you said, I know how to run people. So what is the biggest lesson that you have in terms of, or what advice do you have in terms of running people?
It's way easier than most people make it. We had developed crews with crew chiefs, and we developed project managers. And so I was filling the role as a project manager. I had a bunch of crews under me. And the other project managers always have problems with their crews. And I would say there's only two pieces on the board. You have to decide what they have to do and what they can do. People do whatever they have to do. This morning for breakfast, some people had bugs. You know why? Because they had to. It wasn't like their first choice, but it was, I'm going to eat these bugs or I'm going to go hungry. And then somewhere there's somebody speeding down the highway right now at 120 miles an hour because he thinks he can. People do whatever they think they can. People do whatever they have to. So as a person in charge of other people, now this is much easier in the Navy because you own those people. They don't just work for you. They're yours. If you don't want them to have a weekend, they don't have a weekend. You can't do that as a civilian, but you can still implement these two pieces. What do your guys have to do? Like our guys would go run title. If we're trying to lease up land for a company to drill on, you have to run title, find out who owns the mineral rights. My friend Debbie would say, well, my guys, they show up at the courthouse at 11 o'clock. I said, well, they have figured out they don't have to be there at 8 when it opens. And my guys are there at 8. Well, how do you do that? I said, because they have to. How'd you do that? I said, I was there at 8, and everybody who didn't come in, I fired them. You have to. And that only lasts a week. But if you go there the week later and fire a couple more people, then all of a sudden they're there at 8 for the next few months. If you're okay with them having 2 beers at lunch, let them know. But if you come back to the courthouse drunk, or if you go try to buy a lease from somebody and you're drunk at their house, you're history. It's easy to say, a little more difficult to do because you have to implement and enforce this, but give people a really clear understanding of what they have to do. You have to do this. And then we had people working in offices, and I have to tell them, I said, I know you've been here all day, and I know the problem is that you think your job is to be here, but it's not. Your job is to produce stuff. So you have to produce stuff, whether it's reports or you need to precept this or you need to process these leases, whatever it is, that's your job. Your job is not to be here. Your job is to push this process forward and figure out how you can help. If you do that, we're fine. If you don't do that, you're going to be looking somewhere else, starting real quick. You say it nice, but if people think you're kidding, they're not going to do it. Those are the two pieces. People need to know what they can do, and they need to know what they have to.
I'm curious because we had Jason Redman on the show, and he talked about, he said, you want to learn how to run a business, run a nonprofit. And being that you co-founded the nonprofit Beyond the Teams, and you came from company, right? And a company, and then you're now doing this nonprofit. Can you talk to us about your nonprofit and talk to us about the differences? Like, is what Jason said, like, does that resonate with you?
I met him at the museum a couple of years ago. I wish I had stuck around and talked to him. Wow.
That's where I met him too. I met him at the museum.
Good guy, really good guy. Probably, yeah. Running a nonprofit is pretty slippery for me. What we do is stuff that we think will intrigue people and then use it to raise money to help other people who have needs. So we've raised a little over $400,000 in the almost 5 years that we've been around. And we've bought special equipment for a rehab center. We've raised over $150,000 for the charities that the museum runs. We've helped get some of the female tactical platoon members, these are Afghan women who operated with our special forces. And we left them in Afghanistan when we just jerked everything out of there, everybody out of there. And so we've raised money to get them out of the country, and we've gotten a bunch of them out. We've helped drill a water well for a clinic in a school in Uganda. So we've done that. Those are the kinds of things we do. We did a 1,000-mile bike ride from the SEAL base in Little Creek down to the museum. Raised a decent amount of money, even though we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we all knew how to ride bicycles, but that's about it. So we continued to learn, but really the admin side of it was just eating me alive, you know. And so we hired a lady who is a really good admin. She's just a good leader and a good, smart person who knows how to do all this stuff. This has been a building year for us. I mean, we're building kind of the back office. Mm-hmm. We have some really good plans in the future. One of our guys, the other founding member, my buddy who's a PA, he just came back from Israel supporting the IDF. So we're doing a Zoom call. People have to donate some money to be on it, but it's like an eyewitness account from what's happening in Israel right now, the conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah and whoever else is in line. It's a bunch of team guys. And if team guys are looking at this episode of your video, of your podcast, I think, you know, one of the things that for me is that a lot of guys find what I found. You know, you go work for a company and it's like a bunch of guys whose highest aspiration is to not get fired. You know, what's the least I can do is keep my job. And it's just this environment that's not healthy. It's not life enhancing. If you're stuck in something like that, come get out and do stuff with us. We started with a catch line. There's no finish line because we used to do stuff in the Navy that most people thought was crazy and usually help somebody that we'd never meet. Hey, we're still doing that. There's no finish line. But the craziest things started happening. Well, first, we did that bike ride. Conrad, my friend, lives in Hawaii. And every time he comes to the mainland, he'll stop over at our house, wherever he's going, and then stop at our house on his way back. So we boxed our bicycles up at the museum in Fort Pierce, flew him here, and now it's time for Conrad to head home. So he's going out the front door with his bag, and I'm coming out of the garage with his bike box. I'm done riding the bike. I'm like, what? We just formed this nonprofit. What are we going to do? So no time to argue. I put it back in the garage. I'm driving him down to the airport. I said, what are we going to do now? He goes, we're going to paddle an outrigger canoe. I said, we are? Okay. So there were 5 of us on the bike ride. 3 of them moved away or decided that, you know, that was enough. So we went and bought a 6-man outrigger canoe. There's 2 of us. We started recruiting guys and we started paddling. And it was so much fun. I mean, I just paddled this morning with our son. It's therapeutic. So guys with bad shoulders, bad backs, bad necks, guys with mental health issues started getting better. Part of it was being back with the guys, and part of it was being out on the water. Part of it was just making your body do things again that it didn't used to do for a while. So we changed our thing from there's no finish line to we're at our best when we're helping others become their best. So we're doing this so we can help somebody, but it's helping us too. That's what Beyond the Teams. I just encourage any team guy, and you don't got to be a team guy. You know, we have a couple guys, that DHS guys, Civil Secret Service guys that have teamed up with us. They're loving it.
I love that. I love that. How have you found coming from the corporate world to running the nonprofit has been, aside from the admin, like, how has that been for you? Like, is just a new challenge?
It's definitely challenging. You know, I don't mind doing like the training on a bike or training on a outrigger canoe or a kayak or something. Actually, I love that. It's hard to ask people for money. And there is I heard somebody say it, a need fatigue. When you look around, there's so many people with legitimate needs. It can be overwhelming. One more group saying, hey, support this thing we're doing. You know, so now we're in that pile. We're trying to do good things and trying to get 2 things to happen. Number one, for us to be intriguing enough to the general population that they'll want to support the different initiatives that we get behind. And we want to get more and more special operators off the couch or off the bar stool and back into life.
I love that. That's really awesome. And after talking to you, I'm really excited to talk to David. I have some new questions for him now that I got this opportunity to talk to you first, which is pretty awesome. And I want to ask you as our my last question I ask everyone, what do you have that advice that our listeners can do on the daily to develop that mental toughness and or to get off the couch and to tap into that untapped potential that we're not hitting?
Something that I've been thinking about lately that I think might be helpful is have goals, but that shouldn't be your focus. When you went through that training, did you do any shooting?
No.
Okay, well, when you shoot, and every team guy will know this, the saying that you hear over and over again is front sight focus. And just like when you're watching a TV show or a movie, one thing's in clear focus and everything else is a little bit out of focus. Anything farther away or closer is a little bit fuzzy. If you're shooting and you really, really try to focus on the target downrange, you have a worse chance of hitting it than if you focus on the front sight of your weapon. To me, that bullseye on the target, say 25 yards downrange in a pistol range, is your goal. So what's the front sight? It's habits. If you want to get really good at public speaking, develop a habit. Collect quotes. Collect stories. Start following really, really talented speakers online, and don't just go, wow, that was really good. What did he do? How many stories did he tell? How long were they? Did he make the audience laugh, or was it emotionally pulling? So develop habits and make that your focus. That's your front sight. So if you really want to be great at a particular subject, topic, or task, athletic endeavor, there are habits that lead to that goal. The habits need to be the focus, not the goal. That's, I think, is the simplest way to break it down. I liken, just daydreaming about the goal is kind of like when I was in high school and I met a girl, and I would be at my house all by myself, just dreaming about being with this girl, but not doing anything about it. It's like, what good is that? You have to do something. And since you can't just land on the goal, work at it and develop a habit.
Thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed that bit of advice, and I really enjoyed talking with you, and thanks for being on the show.
You made this really easy for me. I didn't know what to expect, so thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And I'm super excited to talk to David as well and have him on the show. For everyone that's listening, you do not want to miss David's episode after this episode. It's going to be absolutely incredible. David's story is incredible. And I hope this resonated with all you guys as well. Please don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Patreon member so you get access to our bonus episodes and extra goodies that only our Patreons get. And I will see you all next week as you hear David's story. So thank you guys all so much.